Hello and welcome to my quick breakdown for my entry to the pwnisher Moving Meditations Render Challenge. My main inspiration for this project was the video game Kena Bridge of Spirits, as well as Nintendo's Zelda series, specifically the Koroks that are featured in some of the games. The very first thing I created was the spirit creature. I started with a sculpt in Zbrush. After a quick retopology using Z-Remesher, I exported the model into Cinema 4D, where I added some eyes that I had created for a previous project, UV unwrapped the character and exported it for texturing in Substance Painter. I thought it would be interesting to give them the appearance of a sort of plush toy come to life, so I added a felt texture and painted a variation of sewing lines on top using Painter's sewing brushes. In C4D I created a quick rig for the character, added some controllers for arms, body and eyes, with some espresso magic for automatic eyelid movement, as well as an easily accessible control setup for the manual control of the eyelids and blink. I also added some dynamic IK chains to the tail and leaf decorations. The character was ready to be animated now. The other ones were just iterations of this original one. I created a few different versions of the masks and horn accessories and textured them the same way as the first one by choosing a workflow where I bake a high poly sculpt on a low poly version of the same model and in the process transferring most of my sculpted details as texture details in the normal channel of the texture of the low poly model. This can give your models a highly detailed look at a very low poly count. I then combined the assortment of different masks, horns and leaves into a variation of 20 different mask layouts. I animated two different idle animations of about 500 frames each and applied my 20 mask layouts to either of them to then bake them out as Alembic files. I could now choose which part of the animation I wanted each spirit to show, as the final scene would only be a fraction of the idle animations I created, making it seem like they all behave differently. I would now apply my textures. I had created variations for every texture, so the spirits would have different body colors and also show different mask details. By using a shader switch node in Redshift and linking it to the ID in a Redshift tag, I was able to change colors on the fly and later be able to easily art direct which color I wanted a specific character in my scene to be. For my main character, I had the idea to take a few of the little guys and have them behave like children standing on top of each other, imitating an adult. Because my spirits did not have any legs though and also very short arms, there would have to be some sort of prosthetics involved, so I decided to make a puppet controlled from within. Most of the puppet's design decisions were made along the way, as I tried to figure out how things might connect and work together. The clothing was simulated in Marvelous Designer, using a proxy with a bit more volume so the cloth would not get stuck on the many small details. With my character down after day 3, it was time to tackle the environment. The very first thing I did was to create a very basic blockout in 3D, just using my main character, some cubes and a spirit for size reference. This I threw into Photoshop to make a very rough sketch of what I'd like my scene to look like. I then started with the creation of the assets, starting with the bigger pieces, working my way down to the smaller ones. The workflow was the same almost every time. Basic model in C4D, high poly sculpt in ZBrush, bake and texturing in Substance Painter. The trees were made with Insydium's Taiao plugin, which lets you create any sort of plant, but after creating the base model, they went through the same process as the others. Many of the smaller plants were made with Taiao as well, including the ferns and grass. The network of roots was made using Xparticles and a setup that lets particles follow surfaces while creating branches and grow towards a certain point, imitating the sun. I would position emitters wherever I thought these roots might look interesting and then simulate these. The bigger roots are basically just a cylindrical object wrapped around splines with some details sculpted on top. The flags and large canvases were also simulated in Marvelous Designer. For the clouds and flames, I decided on a simulation in Embergen, which is an amazing tool to create fire and smoke effects in real time. I exported a series of clouds as VDB files, arranged them in C4D and rendered them using Redshift. The scene is mainly lit by an infinite light and a dome light using a sky HDRI. I've used some additional lights to make the main character stand out more and added a few rim lights for some edge lighting. I added an environment object and some more lights to create some volumetric lighting. Lastly, I added a few planes with an animated alpha texture between the scene and the main light sources to block out some of the light and create an effect of leaves throwing some small moving shadows. My scene was mostly done now, and with a week to go until deadline, it was time for fine-tuning, fixing what was broken and adding some more detail to try and go the extra mile. I added a few last-minute additions to the scene, like the chameleon or the butterflies. The butterflies were a good opportunity to use the C4D motion system, which made it very easy to fine-tune the speed of the wing flaps, which are all just based on a single loop and then sped up or slowed down using motion clips. With just a few days to go, the 3D part of my scene was pretty much done, and all that was left to do was some compositing and After Effects. I've exported a series of AOV render passes from Redshift that came in really handy during this part, like various mats, a depth pass, passes for volumetrics and emission or transmittance. In After Effects I gave the render some more contrast and saturation, added a few particles that I created in parts with Xparticles and Trapcode particular, and also added a stylized wind effect on top plus some additional god rays in the center. And that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this little breakdown. Let me know if there is something else you want to know more about. This is the first time I made one of these, so hopefully it was at least a little bit interesting. Thank you for watching and goodbye.